Now, what we wanted to make sure in the call that we announced that year is we are developing a clear framework that supports the process from its onset to make sure that, as I said earlier, our programs are tailored to country context and are inclusive to everybody in terms of design. So the call went out to countries with two main objectives. One is around the CRPD implementation. The other one is about the SDGs, but also, of course, we couldn't ignore that COVID was a key central implication for persons with disabilities. So we opened also the chance to countries to respond to us with propositions around how to make sure COVID is inclusive as well. Now, the process we adopted in the new strategy, as I said, that we were no longer accepting proposals or even concept notes immediately responding to our calls. We wanted first to adopt what was called an inception phase. Once countries are scored as potential programs for our work, they had to go through the inception phase, which started with an induction training to bring everybody together around the key concepts and areas of work that we wanted to support. But also we developed a clear situational analysis framework. We knew that in many countries, and as you all know, and I'm sure you discussed earlier, there is still a clear gap in terms of data when it comes to disability in many countries. We wanted to make sure that even though we are not an academic organization, yet still we developed a clear, rigorous situational analysis framework that helps countries to start to understand the situation and build the program in accordance to that. Now, just in this slide, I'm just gonna run through the phase where we selected 26 countries out of the 110 that responded to our call. And those 26 countries, we started with them the piloting of this framework that I'm talking about. The purpose, as I said, for the situational analysis was really to understand the main bottlenecks and priorities in each country when it comes to CRPD implementation, but also to inform our program design. But we knew also it can serve beyond our purpose, because we knew that many actors at national level are keen to get more updated data on disability inclusion, including civil society organizations. This is just a brief explanation further on the questions we looked at. So we looked at capabilities of actors, we looked at the situation, the landscape more at national level, but we wanted also to understand the COVID situation and its implications at country level. Just briefly, the way our strategy is centered, we also divided our analysis into looking at 4 key preconditions, looking at the CRPD compliant budgeting, accountability and governance, accessibility, inclusive service delivery, and equality and non-discrimination. But we also looked equally in the situational analysis framework at understanding the implications on women and girls with disabilities, looking at the most unaddressed and marginalized groups within the disability community, but also specifically zooming into the participation principle, whether at the government processes or within our own processes that we guided countries to. Now, in terms of the reflections so far on the situational analysis, as we are speaking, we're finalizing the analysis from the 26 countries, and we would be more than happy to share with you the findings from that. But what I'm sharing with you today is more reflection on the process, which was equally important to us, because as I said, we saw the process as an empowering capability to actors, specifically the civil society organizations of persons with disabilities. We wanted to see if it worked and what can be done to reinforce that process further. The initial learning we have gathered so far gave us the realization that it worked, even though it was an extensive process. It was a short period of time. Most countries had to complete it within 6 months. We gave core funding, so it wasn't a big amount of money, but still we could see from feedback received from all actors that it was a very interesting and important learning process. It sort of forced everybody to come together around realizing what are the key priorities in the countries. They had to really agree on priorities because we put that as a must to be realized before we move into looking into their proposals. Of course, it wasn't straightforward and easy because in some countries, we could see that even engagement with organizations of persons with disabilities wasn't so straightforward. In some countries, there was very limited capacities of those organizations. Some others, they were in conflict with each other and they had to really agree who's to be involved and who's not. So there were some issues that we will continue to work on, but overall, the learning so far has been that it's really made a transformation in the way the UN system at country level and the governments are perceiving civil society organizations and engaging with them in that process. In terms of the quality, as I said, we knew that in some countries, even the capabilities of consultants and maybe colleagues at country level wouldn't be so high to be able to understand data gathering, methodology, analysis, and coming up with discussions and conclusions. But so far, we have seen that even though it varied from one country to another, yet we could see interesting data coming out. We could see that there was capability at country level to come up with clear recommendations that was gathered by everybody. And they managed to complete really the process on time, between brackets, in a way that helped them start the process of shaping the program moving forward. It was very interesting also to see that the capacities of consultants at country level varied. So in countries where consultants had higher capacities, that the consultants that were hired by the UN system to facilitate the process, but in countries where consultants' capability was very low, or the UN offices that led the process had little understanding on disability inclusion, the process was much harder to achieve. And also we had to really be hands-on with them to help them to realize the data, to analyze it, and come up with clear guidance on how to analyze and recommend with the other actors as well. We could also see that there are massive gaps at country level from the start of, in terms of understanding disability, even the definition of disability, understanding what are we talking about when we are saying organizations of persons with disabilities and how far they are similar or different from other civil society actors. Even the broader frameworks around CRPD and SDGs, they needed further understanding and guidance on how to analyze them and how to look, where to look in the government processes to have that clear reflection around their inclusivity. The methodology itself is something we are looking at more deeply in the coming few weeks, because we could see that there are areas where we could advance further in terms of clarity of questions, but also capability and guidance to adapt to the country context. And we could see that there will be in other phases of other countries a greater need for technical assistance to support countries, not just in terms of understanding disability inclusion, but really, as I said, more of broader capability of analysis, even reflection of priorities to programming, and also this cross-country learning that we were not able to do so much in that phase, but we are looking how to adapt further strategies moving forward. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful to you, but as I said, for us, it was massive learning. It is definitely something that we will continue to advance and adopt in the future, because as I said, data-driven programming for us is very, very key, because we want to make sure that our core funding that goes to countries is really based on what countries are in need for, and that the voice and capability and partnership with civil society organizations representing disability is central to our work. Thank you so much, Vera, but I'm happy to take any questions if any.
Thank you very much, Ola. Do we have any questions at all for Ola? I'll just give a few minutes, but I think we might all be very tired after 3 hours and 45 minutes of workshopping.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, this is Sushil Oswald from the University of Washington in the United States. My question for you is that you mentioned that there were about 100 countries that were responding, and you selected 21 of those respondents. What was the criteria for that selection?
Thank you for the question. Yes, so we received 110. We didn't exclude that in any country. Unfortunately, if we had enough funding, we would have immediately supported everyone at the same time. But because we only had funding for 26 countries out of 110, what we did is we developed criteria in terms of scoring those proposals and concept notes or expressions of interest, we call them at the beginning. And the criteria looked at different elements. One, in terms of the capabilities of actors at country level, the landscape at national level in terms of the momentum, if there are any priorities in the country that if we come in, we could be of an added value. We looked at also at the capabilities of the government, the UN system, and the civil society to run through our programs, and we seek external experts. So the decision of scoring those expressions of interest wasn't only done by the technical secretariat or the governance level. We looked at bringing on board representatives of experts from civil society, from the CRPD experts, from SDG, mainstreaming thinking of leave no one behind, and those experts initially scored those proposals. And based on that, what we did is we classified the 110 countries into 3 tiers. So tier 1 was the one we had money for, and they are the countries that scored highest. But now, for example, this year, we have additional funding for more 10 additional countries, and we're moving forward in the coming weeks with those countries. So there will be part of the tier 2. So again, we will be selecting the second highest top countries. But in some cases, for example, out of the 110 countries, I'm sure you have known that Ghana was a co-host of the Global Disability Summit. So Ghana was part of the tier 2, but last year, because we could see the added value we could bring in if we start the program earlier, so we did get an approval from our governments to start the process with them last year in December. So now they are doing what I explained earlier, the induction phase. So I hope that explains to you. So it's really more of a prioritization, because we make sure if countries are interested to move forward with disability inclusion, they remain on our pipeline, because we don't want to exclude any country. It's unfortunate it's that the limitation of funding usually pushes us to do this kind of tiers or classification to just make sure that we're not missing momentums in certain countries as well.
We have a question in the chat, which is, were there questions about each country's commitment to funding OPDs?
Look, for us, funding OPDs is part of, we don't call it funding OPDs, we call it developing systematic partnership with OPDs. So our programs, one of the key criteria we look at is make sure that the OPDs or persons with disability are not just recipients of the programs. So definitely when we accompany the design of the program, we make sure that the OPDs that were involved, for example, in this cycle, in the program design, are also considered in the program implementation as partners. And of course, part of that, there will be allocations for them financially to oversee the activities that they were allocated for. Additional to that, all our programs, since the establishment of the fund 12 years ago, is mandating the UN system to develop this national steering committee, where organizations of persons with disabilities are part of that. And the mandate of the steering committee is to oversee the implementation monitoring of the programs as they go, and it coordinates with our team at the headquarter office as well.
Thank you very much. I think that's all the questions we've got time for. So again, thank you very much for that really interesting talk, Ola. And we hope you all enjoyed the workshop and will be able to take away some learning that can influence your practice, whether you're an academic, a researcher, or a development specialist. And all sessions have been recorded, so they'll be made available publicly in about a week or so once we've had some time to ensure the captions are correct. And the links will be shared with everyone registered for the session. So if you missed one of the sessions, then you'll be, or weren't able to attend one, then you'll be able to catch up on that. And we'll also be circulating a feedback survey tomorrow. So we would really appreciate if you could take the time to provide feedback to us. And we'd like to thank everyone for participating and making this a really interesting workshop. Thank you very much to Ola for her keynote speech, to Shawnee Elise from HRC for joining us, to Ted and Sarah for providing technical support, and to our captainers Lee and Maria as well. And most importantly, to all the case study members and co-researchers who've put together the sessions and made this event possible. And this network has been a fantastic example of showing that the whole really can be more than the sum of its parts. And it's been a real privilege to be involved in this network. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a good rest of the day or evening, depending on where you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.